Thank you for joining us today in the seminar Conducting Research and Community Services During COVID-19 Pandemic. Before I transfer the webinar room to our moderator today, to Bu Mary, I would like to provide a brief introduction to ensure that our webinar this afternoon will run smoothly and effectively. So these are some of the things that we need to ensure. Have my slides shown by all participants. So the first one, we recommend you that the mic and speaker to mute position, and for the speaker later on each turn when you speak, then you can unmute your speaker. For the participants, if you have any questions, there are two ways that you can do that. The first one, if you have a written question, you can click the chat icon at the lower part of your monitor, and you can type your question on the chat and to whom your questions will be. For the direct questions that you are going to ask during Q&A session at the end of the webinar, I think depending on the time, I think we can accommodate 2 or 3 participants to directly raise the questions. Then you can click the participants icon and raise your hand. Then we will deliver and we can open your mic and you can raise your questions directly to the speakers. So that's the brief introduction to ensure that our webinar this afternoon can run smoothly. Thank you, and I shall transfer this webinar room to our moderator, Bu Mary. Please, Bu Mary.
Thank you, Madam. Well, our webinar is about to begin. Thank you very much, all participants, for preparing yourself to join our international webinar. Honorable Rector of Balikpapan University, Dr. Piatur Pangaribuan, the respectable guest speakers, and distinguished all participants of this webinar. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to welcome you to this international webinar. I'm Mary Krisdawati Sipangsa, will be moderating today's webinar. This webinar is organized by Institute for Research and Community Services, or LPPM Balikpapan University, Indonesia. Today's webinar will last 2 hours. So for those who are not welcome to speak, please set your audio or speaker off. Participants, COVID-19 is not just altering everyday life. It's also upending research and community services. As universities and colleges all over the world go virtual, researchers are scrambling to protect their human participants, animal subjects, their fun, and their careers as well. This is going to slow everybody down doing their tasks during the pandemic. To find out how researchers from various countries conducting their researches and community services under COVID-19 pandemic, soon we'll be hearing presentations from special speakers. But before the presentation begins, may I invite Rector of Balikpapan University, Dr. Piatur Pangaribuan, to deliver an opening remark. Please, Pak Rector.
Thank you, Mrs. Mary, as a moderator. Good afternoon, everybody or every participant. Firstly, I would like to say thank you very much to all distinguished speakers. Dr. Khamla from Mahidol University, Thailand. Thank you, Pak. Maybe you never come to Indonesia. I would like to invite you come to Indonesia and come to our campus. We're very happy to welcome you. And then Dr. Khamla from National University of Laos, thank you very much for allocating your valuable time. You know, you're very busy, maybe in country just the same like us. Yes. We are busy to to transfer the new normal. Before we are conduct manual, but now already digital. We takes a lot of energy, but you still have a time. Look at your time. Thank you very much. And then Mr. Lauren, Dr. Lauren from University of Amsterdam. Pak Lauren already give a lot of time visit to Indonesia, and because Pak Lauren has a field of research regularly come to Indonesia. And hopefully we can join to us and see directly our campus. And also, will you please invite us to see and come to set your campus? We are very happy if you are willing to invite us also. As Ms. Mary said, Indonesia right now around 69,000 already convicted COVID-19, but government already take control. Especially we are happy to Indonesia people. They are still can arrange. They still open their mind when the government, local government or central government, when the government give a fast, they are only follow. But what as you know, it's very difficult to control. But in my opinion, Indonesia is still under control because only 69,000. If compared with the America, already 300,000. This time I would like thank you very much. Hopefully you're willing to sharing your situation in your every country, and I will give you our information about our campus. This campus established in 1981, and we have nice student body around 7,000. In my opinion, the level this campus is middle up campus according to government regulation. We are now we have 7,000 as a student body. Hopefully, and we can share our experience this time to all the participants. And I would like to thank you to all the committee who already arranged this webinar. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you very much to all distinguished speaker and all the participants, and especially to the committee who arranged this webinar very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pak Rector. Now we are coming to the presentation session. For today's webinar, as I informed previously, there are 3 guest speakers who do carry out different research interests coming from various countries. They are, in the first place, Dr. Simab Kanwal. She is a senior researcher in the Institute of Molecular Biosciences at Mahidol University, Bangkok, Thailand. She works on biochemistry and molecular biology research and produces many papers published in high-impact journals. Hello, Dr. Simab.
Hello. Good afternoon.
In the second place, there is Dr. Khamla Inkhavilay. He works in the Department of Biology, Faculty of Natural Science at National University of Laos, Vientiane, Laos. He currently serves as Deputy Director of Chinese Research Center at National University of Laos. His expertise on invertebrates. Hi, Dr. Khamla.
Hi, Mary and everyone.
And the third one, there is Dr. Lawrence Bakker. He is Associate Professor at Department of Anthropology, Faculty of Social and Behavioral Sciences at University of Amsterdam, Netherlands. He works on questions of governance, law, and justice with a focus on land use. Good morning there, Dr. Lawrence.
Good morning to you, Baberi. Indeed, I'm 6 hours behind you, so it's still morning here.
Yeah, good morning. Okay, thank you. All right, without further ado, I would like to welcome all speakers to deliver the presentations. Each speaker has 15 to 20 minutes to present the material. Now, let's take a look at the first speaker, Dr. Simab Kanwal. Dr. Simab, the room is yours.
Okay, so I'm going to share my presentation. All
Yes,
right.
please.
Okay, is that all right? Everyone can see my slides?
Yes.
Yes, I can see your slide now.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, dear colleagues, students, researchers, and the whole scientific community audiences that have joined our international webinar conducting research and community services during COVID-19 pandemic, organized by the Institute for Research and Community Services, Balikpapan University, Indonesia. And thank you very much, Dr. Mary, for the nice introduction. It took 12 weeks for the world to reach 400,000 cases of COVID-19. There have been over 11 million cases of COVID-19 and more than 530,000 lives have been lost so far. The outbreak is accelerating and we have clearly not reached the peak of the pandemic yet, of course, while the number of deaths appear to have leveled off globally. In reality, some countries have made significant progress in reducing the number of deaths, while in other countries, deaths are still on the rise. Over the past few months, there have been a lot of discussion about the origin of COVID-19, and the print, social, and electronic media are quite flooded with a lot of information about what are the clinical manifestations of COVID-19 patients, how it spreads, and what are the precautionary measures that should be taken. So now almost everyone knows the details. So in today's talk, I will focus on discussing how scientists, particularly biotechnologists, are dealing with this challenge, and more about the past and present scenario of corona crisis in Thailand and upcoming global strategies. COVID-19 is emerging rapidly evolving situation, and Wuhan Municipal Health Commission in China reported a cluster of cases of pneumonia in Wuhan in Hubei province somewhere at the end of the December in 2019. That was the first time when a novel coronavirus was eventually identified, and it took them almost like 10 days for the identification of the new virus that was named as COVID-19. So I shall discuss the present scenario of COVID-19 situation. The very first case that was reported outside China was in Thailand, and it was not earlier than the mid of the January 2020. And up till then, until the end of the January, the death toll was like, it arose more than 132,600 cases that were reported in China. So in the same time, the World Health Organization was quite like taking notes and recording what's going on, especially in China. And they were just like maintaining their own issues, delivering the issues and their own timelines with the passage of the time. And they were taking the records and notes very seriously throughout the pandemic until now. I just had a brief timeline of the World Health Organization and their archives, and right from the beginning when the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission reported a cluster of the cases of pneumonia, because initially it was just considered a case of the pneumonia, and the novelty of this coronavirus was not identified then. It was just in January 2020 when WHO reported on social media that there is a cluster of pneumonia cases, yet there was no death until that time. And they published that the disease outbreak news are due to the cause of, by a new virus. So, and they issued a comprehensive package of technical guidance online based on the experiences that they have previously encountered in case of SARS and MERS viruses. Up to before the middle of the January, China publicly shared the COVID-19 genetic sequence. At the same time, when the news of the pandemic, at that time, it was not declared as a pandemic, but it was just considered that this is going to be something very serious because of the way it was spreading throughout in China. And they, at the same time, the scientists and the background, they were definitely working on their part, and they just shared the first genetic sequence for the first time, and it was a China that they have done it and officially confirmed the first case of COVID-19 in Thailand as well. And it was also, after a field visit, it was also reported that there are the evidences of human-to-human transmission for this coronavirus. So all of these kind of studies and declaration and observation were going on in the month of the January, and they were just trying to understand more about this outbreak. And by the end of the January, it was declared a public health emergency of international concern. WHO released the international community strategy and preparedness at the same time in March. And they just conducted the joint mission, including the experts from various other countries. And a solidarity trial was also conducted to find the most effective treatments for the COVID-19. So afterward, the rest is a history. Everyone knows that it just traveled from country to country, and now all of the world, even globally, everyone is just is kind of the victim of this novel coronavirus. Since yesterday, there have been more than 11 million cases that were reported to WHO, including 539,906 deaths. And this case was like, if we just go to the country-wise, the continent-wise as well, America is so far on the top of this situation, following by Europe and then Middle East, and then Southeast Asia and Africa. Coming back to the COVID-19 response in Thailand. As I mentioned earlier that in the mid-January, the first local transmission was discovered at that time, and it was reported. In fact, in the beginning, it was quite spread by some travelers from China into the Thailand. But later on, the very main reason for the outburst in Thailand was from the 2 clusters that were detected out of some sports activity. So they just, a big outbreak, like more than 35 and 36 people at once were recorded to be having interacted with this disease right from a boxing stadium. So immediately there was a rush and an emergency declared. It was a state of emergency, and the government declared it on 24 March. And it was followed by all of the situations that are observed during the state of the emergency, including the shutdown of the markets, restaurants, schools, universities, and except hospitals and pharmacy stores and some kind of the shops for utility purpose, everything was almost closed. So Thailand, in fact, have reopened and covered, after they covered this COVID-19 situation, they just followed 5 phases. They didn't just go to at once lift the curfew or just to open the lockdown and just allow everyone to open everything. No, it was just that they did in stepwise manner. So start from 25th March, when the curfew was imposed only at night, but the closing of the shop, malls, universities, and hotels and restaurants, everything like that is for the public activity, and even the inter-province transportation was also closed at that time. And later on, in the phase 1, that was started on 3rd of the May. In April, I must tell you that there were like very strict kind of the regulations and issues by the government, and the instructions that meant to be followed by everyone, followed by the imposition of any kind of the fine and punishments if no citizen is going to follow those rules and regulations. The reduction of the nighttime curfew was done in phase 1, and it was just it started in 3rd of the May. And in April also there was a very strict ban on alcohol sale and consumption, and they just asked to keep it reserved for your future celebration when the pandemic is over. So in the 2nd and 3rd phase, The Royal Thai government has approved the second phase for easing the restriction, and it started on 17th of the May, and the third phase in 1st of the June. In that, the economic and daily life activities, the sales of food and drinks were allowed to resume in restaurants, food courts, cafeterias, and eateries, excluding pubs and bars. But definitely it was after the consideration of the number of the cases that are appearing per day. Phase 4 was it began last month in 15th of the June, when the universities, schools, and restaurants, hotel, daycare centers, and leisure parks and other kind of sports activity were also allowed publicly. Though there are still a kind of you can say restriction on the international traveling, but very soon maybe for some kind of the countries who have very less number of COVID-19 cases, or who have already get rid of this situation, they are just a kind of exception to that. Start from the 1st July, now we are in the phase 5. So in phase 5, the easing of the restrictions on high-risk businesses and leisure activities, academic activities, but with proper hygiene measures, outdoor sports, and there is no curfew right now. As I said, that Thailand was the first country who to record an infection outside China, has so far been relatively unscathed. And there are no new local cases recorded since last month in the country. And just there are overall 58 deaths recorded since the outbreak began in January. So we just have to look into what would be the possible reasons that how Thailand has kept the lid on COVID-19. The first thing that someone can think about is about the inaccurate numbers, that the numbers that are reported on media or in the record, they might be not accurate. So it is just a debunking a conspiracy theory that has steadily lost traction over recent weeks, that cases of COVID-19 in Thailand are actually much higher than reported. If the pandemic was as serious as in European countries or in US, they have been talking about thousands of deaths. You know, it's not really very easy to hide the number of the deaths in a country. So it's not credible to think that kind of cover-up is happening. Climate, custom, and other variables. There is no clear explanation to this, by the way, but some of the theories are floating there, that the warmer weather and humid weather here, the racial differences, and the cultural preference, like people normally don't shake hand, they don't hug. It is just a cultural preference here in Thailand. And wearing of the mask, face mask, was already a common practice, that people were doing it even before the rise of this pandemic. So the effectiveness of government responses to the crisis is definitely another variable to cover the COVID-19. The government and Thailand's robust security system were largely responsible for the kingdom's success. The willingness of politicians to let health experts call the shots. And I could see here very clearly that there was a complete coherence between the political stance and the health experts. And the public was having a proper trust in both of them. The coordination and cooperation between the government, department, as well as provincial and local bodies across the country, the clarity of the communication to the public about how to avoid the disease transmission, and the universal precaution attitude that as everyone should assume that everyone has the disease until proven otherwise. So everyone have to take care of themselves as if they are carrying this disease. More than 1,000 epidemiological teams across the country had been working to investigate every single case and trace every contact and monitor them for 14 days. So there was a big public volunteer team as well. Now, as I said clearly, there are no new local cases. There are 4 or 5 cases reported since yesterday, but these are the imported cases from the people who have traveled from some other countries, especially the Middle East. So they are the reported cases, and government is really, especially the immigration, is really putting some kind of the halt on the traveling conditions. The tourism is of course halted. The tourist visa is not allowed up to many months. Who knows when it will be lifted. So that it is very important for the people to not let their guard down. Thailand may face a second wave if the re-emerging infections, like many other countries that reported reinfection in group clusters from crowded places such as fresh market and entertainment venues. So there is indeed really a need there to keep the lid covered until now. One thing is very clear, that every country on this planet is battling the same fight, that is against COVID-19. And in certain times, we are witnessing one of the greatest moments in the history of science. Scientists around the world, they are just like trying to respond to this crisis, and the global biotech community has been truly inspiring in that case. At first, the very important thing that scientists are doing, they are trying to understand the structure and the component of the virus. It's very important to determine, and then they will know that how to fight it. Once they know how it behaves, how it looks like, what are the structural components, and the biologists are just comprehensively working on that. They're also using the previous experiences. Like you might have heard that previously there was SARS coronavirus that was a first generation, and COVID-19 in fact shares about 80% similarity, the genetic similarity with SARS coronavirus 1 generation. So they are just trying to use that experience to understand how the COVID-19 might behave. Screening of the drugs and testing of the drugs to sort out what kind of compound can fight against COVID-19 is a very important point and important focus of the research right now. And at the same time, the coordination and collaboration is important, and sharing of the resources as well. It will help to avoid duplication of the research work. Like if scientists and the researchers around the world, they will coordinate with each other and they will share their findings and research work. It will not let others to repeat the same kind of the work that maybe some other scientists doing in some other part of the world. So with lives at stake, every moment counted as scientists. So set out to develop molecular antibody tests for the coronavirus. Their challenge is to condense a process that usually takes years down to a matter of weeks. Their objective is to ensure to produce reliable tests in very compressed time frame, because the pandemic is very quickly spreading, and the tests that could make an immediate impact in this unprecedented crisis, once a test is developed, the work does not stop here. A collaboration with the medical and research community is required at this stage, and it allows scientists to work together to learn about customers' experiences in the field, something that is proving critical in this crisis, that is like no other. Real-world experience is used to improve the next generation of tests intended to develop. Up to now, there are basically 3 different approaches that are used to, for the treatment of the novel COVID-19. The very first approach that scientists are focusing right now are the repurposed drugs, and then antibodies, and the vaccines definitely. Many of you might have been known about the repurposing of the drugs, that what could it mean? In fact, it is the existing line of defense. You might have heard that different kinds of drugs and medicines are just used in hospitals and by the medical experts, and it varies from country to country. Studying drugs that are already appear to treat other diseases to see if they are effective in the treatment for COVID-19 is known as a repurposing drug. So it is a strategy to identify new uses for approved or investigational drugs that are outside the scope of the original medical indication. Definitely, they are not FDA approved for the COVID-19 cure, but they are used in the extreme cases when the patient is very sick and they don't have, and of course, there is no vaccine and no other kind of FDA approved treatment or medication yet. So they are just using and focusing on the repurposing drugs. Antibody use and the vaccines, these are the other two lines of the defense. In this slide, you see I mentioned about phase 1 and 2. So phase 1 is normally a phase when the drugs are tried for their safety on a small group of healthy subjects. And in the other phase, that is phase 2 and phase 3, a larger number of humans are just used to measure the efficacy, and those are the people for which the vaccine is intended for. This could include granting the experimental drugs expanded access for compassionate use, which would allow the physicians to give them to patients who are critically ill before testing is complete without FDA approval. And phase 3 is followed by the approval of the trial. So what is on trial right now? I just show, I will show you a few of the medications here. They are not my recommendation at all, and they are also, some of them are quite considered obsolete by WHO, but I just show you for a record that what kind of the medical treatment have been opted to cure the COVID-19 patient. And this data I just show here, it was taken from American Association for the Advancement of Science and from World Health Organization. Remdesivir and lopinavir and ritonavir combination, these are in fact the previously used drugs for different kinds of the viral diseases, including HIV. And chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine that you might have heard by also some very famous personalities in the world, also by the president of America, that they just like kind of, you know, try to establish the use of these medicines and just like, you know, ended up buying a big stock out of some other commercial companies. But these are being considered obsolete now. In fact, these are the drugs, as I said, these are the repurposed drugs. These are not in fact made to, were initially made to, for the cure of the COVID-19, but they are just used on the basis of compassionate use for the patients who are seriously ill. And scientists and medical experts, they are trying to figure out about their indications and their efficacy, like better than having none. So some of them that are currently, they are not proof, that there is no proof that any other drug can cure or prevent COVID-19, but there are the drug trials going on. And misuse of hydroxychloroquine especially, it can cause a serious side effect and illness, and even it can cause death. So you might not die of COVID-19, but you may definitely will die if you use these drugs without the proper prescription of the medical expert, or just you just do the self-medication of all those drugs. Different, you know, every human body is different from each other, and everyone have may have some underlying health conditions. And only a medical expert can look into the prescription, can recommend, and can tell you that what doses and what kind of drugs, in what circumstances, under what kind of the physical condition you're supposed to use. In Pakistan and some other countries, dexamethasone, another anti-inflammatory drug, is also very commonly used. Apart from that, the blood plasma therapy is also something that is, you know, a very natural mode of defense. So this is also being used, this strategy. I must tell you that drug development is not so easy as you may assume it to be when you see a drug that just comes in the market and you just go and buy certain medicines. In fact, enough human trials are needed to be done before releasing the drug and vaccine commercially out there. And you know that there is a very big anti-vaccine lobby out there. So it is not very easy to just release a drug it is not difficult to make a vaccine or to work on the vaccine and to do certain other biotech modelings and combinational chemistry and biotechnology synthesis, etc. The thing that takes a lot of time is the clinical trials, the trial of the drug on the human beings, so that it should not be released until it is completely approved clinically and also approved by FDA as well. Of course, biotech companies, they are responding faster than ever. And previously, I just have a timeline here from the Journal of the American Medical Association showing that different kind of the timelines were taken by when there was the outbreak caused by different kind of the viruses, including SARS, influenza A, and influenza A from California, Indonesia separately, and Zika virus as well. For in China, they are working on a lot of the vaccines. As I said, they released the genetic sequence of the virus just in the mid of the January. I think within 15 days after the cases were started to be reported there. But those vaccines are yet not approved for human utilization. And yet the clinical trials are still going on. Coming back to the point that how universities and academics are managing the research and other activities. In order to strictly adhere to the emergency decree issued by the government, every instruction that was passed on by the university and schools and colleges, they were directly coming from the government. And the government have established a Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, and university must have to follow the rules and instructions approved by the government. So the institutes developed the SOPs after the government passed on certain kind of the instructions and issues. And in my institute here in Mahidol University, we had a risk management for novel coronavirus COVID-19. And that carried the very first thing right from the end of the March, that stay at home. So and the director of the institute just requests that all academic personnel, including the students and all laboratory staff, to complete the ongoing experiments. And they just provided us a deadline of 31st of the March. Before that, a week before, the teaching activities were already halted, and they were just put to the break until the next decision comes from the head of the institute or director of the university. And no one was allowed to start a new experiment, and work from home situation was to be extended later on until March 31st. The institute issued measures for the entry and exit of the building and the guideline for the work from home, and online meetings were suggested to be done, and any kind of the unnecessary entrance into the institute was not definitely permitted. In the second and third phase, the extension of the work from home period was extended up to to 30th of the April 2020, and then up to the 31st of the May. So how the evaluation criteria was carried on. The methods were to be considered from the learning outcomes. And if the entry was deemed necessary, like there are certain researchers or students who are just at the verge of finishing their degree, completing their degree program. So it was a kind of situation that was very disturbing for the young researchers as well. So they have to submit the request online. They just introduced an online permission system. And internet SIM cards were also distributed in the students to stay at home, and most of them may not have the internet connectivity or proper instruments for that. So for the online study, it was quite facilitated here. After the curfew was lifted, the lockdown was lifted, life is now back to the normal, and we call it as new normal here. And risk management for novel coronavirus COVID-19, they just issued a new set of the document and instructions on 22nd of the June last month, and that was about that everyone have to resume the full-time office work. So now we have to be present at the workplace, and everything is just like normal, but there are a few restrictions that are waiting for us here. And the first one is, and the very important one is the use of the mobile application. Thai Chana is the mobile app that is compulsory for everyone to use, whether they come to the institute, universities, any public place, in market, everyone should have to check in or check out using that mobile app. And the regular hygienic practices, social distancing and sanitization of the premises and personal hygiene is very much compulsory and imposed to pay the fine if someone does not follow certain kind of the rules. So it is basically about the personal hygiene, and consent for the tracking via mobile phone app is also required. So these are the parts of the new normal situation right now here. Now we know that universities and institutes where the research culture is quite, I think, similar around the globe, and it's not very different. But now everyone have to modify the research culture after the rise of this pandemic. I will not be talking about the social, clinical, or behavioral research here. Maybe my other colleagues or speakers, they would talk about that. But for 2020, the research culture is going to be very slow for everyone, and everyone have to prepare for working remotely. COVID-19 is not just altering the everyday life, it's also upending scientific research. As universities and colleges go virtual, researchers are scrambling to protect their projects, their scholarships, and their careers. Right now, there is a very traumatic situation for everyone. Not all countries can manage the online teaching, so education can be affected in countries that are already having the political conflicts, or they were already having a lot of economic or social problems. It's not easy for everyone. So a very important thing is that we have to be digitally literate at first, and you have to plan to sustain your research work over the allocated time. Make sure that the researchers should have the basic electronic gadgets and the information contact for the team members and access to any electronic material that they need. If you don't know how to use Skype, Zoom, and Hangout, now it is a time to learn. Even for myself, I just learned how to use Zoom. It was my first time ever. I just tried to learn it, but I felt it very good to get literate digitally more and more about the latest technologies. And working with your university to ensure is very important that you're using the proper encryption, and other security protocols are very important when you are analyzing the data or storing the data offsite. So it is just that, different funding agencies, they might have extended the deadlines. Even it happened with me here as well. I work here as on contractual basis. So of course, I have to manage my timeline here. And I clearly wrote down in the report that I have to submit annually about the situation, and everyone knows about it. But since it's not clear when the pandemic will be over, so it is important to think creatively about how to sustain your research over at least the next 3 to 5 months. So you have to plan for, you can do the things that you never had the time to do before. While you're sitting at home, you should not get like frustrated that, oh, I cannot do the benchtop lab work, and I cannot do the data collection, I cannot go out into the field, and I cannot go work on my research to keep maintenance of the experimental organisms, and cannot do some other kind of attend the meetings and conferences. So these are things that are quite frustrating for the researchers. But in the meanwhile, we have to think what we can do now. Like, you have to shift from working online, from working on the benchtop laboratory work, to the chance to work on a paper. Take online courses, build your skills. You are always saying that you will be doing it. Like for me, I just during, it was like about 2.5 months of the lockdown here, and I just prepared myself for the next project, just wrote down the data that I was already having in my hand and prepared the report, the manuscript, and there were some pending manuscripts that were just kept in my folder long time before, and I was not having time to write them. So it was a good time for me that no one is going to disturb me. I don't have to, you know, get ready every morning, go out, seek the transportation, go to the university. In fact, it is time saving, and you can just, you know, take rest whenever you feel like and get up and just do your work when you feel like, and just take it in that sense. And it was quite enjoyable for me because basically I'm not a morning person, so I just like try to take time in until the noon to get completely to my senses and just start my work, and then I'm more productive in afternoon and in evening, and also sometime in late evening. So you just, if you're just a leader, just keep your research staff busy. You cannot just tell them that, oh, I'm going to fire you temporarily, but rehire you later on after we will recruit again. This is not, you know, it doesn't happen like that. They can be assigned different tasks. You can put your staff checking the data for journal articles, they can prepare it for that. You can look into modifying your research plan. That is a very important thing. Like due to this lockdown period, when you're stuck at home, you have to modify your research plan and your analysis method. And this is more about the researchers who rely on face-to-face interaction to collect data, and they have to hit a pause and go online. If you're just shifting to remote data collection and storage, keep in mind that changing methodologies means modifying your institutional review board approval and doing another round of the consent as well. So digital literacy issues are important concern in that case. There is a segment of the population that knows Zoom very well and others who do not know what it is. So you will also have to account for changing the methods midstream, such as switching from paper and pencil survey to online surveys and online versions. And at the same time, it is very important to maintain the communication with your team. And you also have to safeguard the mental health of your team. Ask about their concerns and offer the problem-solving help. A big part of it is telling them that this is not a normal time for everyone, of course, and it's okay not to be as productive as you were before. All of us definitely might have some junior colleagues, and I must share here that the students, trainees, and early career researchers, they are the most vulnerable people right now. They are the vulnerable part of the universities and academics because they are the most who are suffering in their research during this pandemic. As faculty, do what you can help to ensure that they continue progressing toward their goals without just pushing them and pressurizing them. You can just be flexible about the deadlines. Reach out to junior colleagues and offer data sets that can work with our opportunities to collaborate with you. Even if I share with you my experience, I'm not a junior colleague, but also I'm not a senior most, and there are people to whom I am accountable, like the committee, the scientific committee of my research program for my project, and I'm quite, accountable to them. And even if I was all having in hand prepared stuff with me, still I was having some pressure in the back of my mind that what if they make some kind of the inflexible decision about me? But luckily I got so relief when they just look into the report and my previous progress, and they evaluated my work from home condition. So it was all that you have to do the documentation, how the crisis is affecting your research, and talk to your chair or your director or head of the program about how you can protect your chances of tenure. The PIs and supervisors They are the ones who are best qualified right now to determine whether their studies can be safely continued or they can be temporarily halted. They are the ones who should be making flexible decisions and inform the sponsors and regulatory bodies promptly, of course. So that was about the different kind of the modifications that we can expect in the research culture. As far as the community services are accounting for, definitely donation and volunteering yourself for the food and pantries, and in case of some kind of the meals, and also medical supplies are the common practices I think right now going on in many countries around the world. You can help the orphanage school, and if you don't know how to do that, just help out someone you know, or contact to other local bodies. There are some kind of local organizations to whom you can volunteer. Earlier I talked about the plasma therapy. Donate blood. You know that blood donations have decreased dramatically. And I must tell you that donating blood is a safe process. The people should not hesitate to give or receive blood, and the need of the blood is constant. So please contact your local Red Cross Society and other kind of the blood donation sites. And now I must say it is about the donation of the plasma. Plasma is a part of the, when they centrifuge the blood, it is the upper aqueous part of the blood that carries the antibodies, and that are normally the basic defense line to cure you for COVID-19. So please do it for free, not at the cost of something. This is a time that you have to help the whole human community, the human species, to save them. And be a leader. If you are in a position that is strong enough and you're professional, you are carrying some professional authority, and you have the decision-making power to allow your team to work your home from the home, and programmatically your organization can operate virtually. Make it happen. If you don't consider your employees to be particularly high risk, making the call to work from home sends an important message to your team and to the sector by letting others know that you and your team are ready to do your civic duty by staying off the public transportation, out of hospitals, and just generally out of the way. And do check your neighbors. Although it is a bit intimidating, but you know, there are some people who might be old, very old, and there might be people who are alone in your neighbors. Do talk to them. Volunteering has been linked to better self-esteem. You will feel a self-acceptance and less depression. That is how it is said about when you do the volunteering, you do the volunteer activities. And last but not least, take care of yourself. You know, the best community service that you can do right now is take precautionary measures and save yourself first. If you protect yourself, you are going to protect the other people around you. So please take care about the precautions and safety measures, and make the smart choices. In the end, I would like to talk a bit of the role of the science and media and politics during this situation. Amid COVID-19 pandemic, being a biologist, it was not very difficult for me, at least, to handle the controversies and understand the precautionary measures, and why I have to do this, because normally being a biologist and biotechnologist, we follow those precautionary measures and do those hygiene practices in routine life when we work in laboratories. So it was something that was not new for us to use the sanitizers and use of the face mask. We just used to do it in our routine laboratory life. At the same time, the scientific community is more panicked and scared of reality than anyone else, because they know a lot of this stuff about this pandemic. But the question arises that, are scientists allowed to play their role as influential policy advisors with other policymakers at the government level? Are they really welcome to do that? And can we learn some kind of the lesson in times of the corona crisis for future crises? Like, it's not only crisis that we have to face, the climate change is another one. So how totally this all pandemic period has also, we also have felt that how inadequate is the scientific structure. It is very disgraceful for science, and nothing has to be done with the politics and the media, of course. In this, the pseudoscience, it just comes out there. So the policies and scientists are, we can say at times, mistrusted by the general public. Apart from there, the fake news, especially on the social media, the misinformation spreads by the social media about, you might have heard that the certain medication is very good and you should go and take it, and you just go, and there is a big, mafia that is going to arose those kind of the controversies. And then there is a misinformation that this kind of the virus arose from some, as a result of the bioterrorism from some laboratory. Different countries are blaming to each other. So I must say, being a biotechnologist, that whatever it is, if it is, let's say, a controversy, let it be. Now it has happened, and now what you have to do is that you have to protect yourself. You have to take the precautions. Now it is there, and you have to accept it as a reality. And the last thing is about the stigma in the society. Even a very famous president has said and used the name Chinese virus for the during this COVID-19 situation, and it is just something that it should not be a very welcoming gesture toward the healthy society. The stigma of when you say that you just attribute this virus to a particular people or community, or to the people from a particular city, it means that your stigmatization that individuals, and this is socially not a very healthy behavior. This is a time for science, not rumors. This is a time for solidarity, not stigma. So we need to understand and spread the awareness about how to counteract to those fake news, misinformation, and also certain kind of the stigmatization in the society. There is a lot to speak right now, but due to the limitation of the time, I would just end up here. And thank you very much for all the audiences out there who kept on listening. And thank you so much, the Society of the Community Awareness, and the extending the community awareness from Balikpapan University, for inviting me to present my views on the current scenario. So the questions are quite welcome, and I think it should be a kind of the discussion, more than just everyone letting to share their comments and point of view out. So everyone, please stay together in spirit. Together we can get through this, and this shall pass. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you for your informative and interesting talk, Dr. Simab. Before we go into the question and answers or discussion session, let's take a look for the second talk by Dr. Khamla Inkhavilay. Time is yours, Dr. Khamla.
Thank you, Mary. I try to share my screen. Open.
Dr. Khamla, it's Adam here. Just wait until the screen is changed to all participants. Then yeah, I think you can start now to share your slides, please.
How I can do? Okay. Okay, good afternoon. This is C.L.A from Laos. And thank you, Mary and Balikpapan University for inviting me to be here to share some experience on COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm very happy to be here. And here I will talk about the impact of COVID-19 on activities in universities and schools in Laos. Before I go to that, I'm talk a little bit about my work and my activities before COVID-19 in Laos. Here I share you some the pictures where I and my students and colleagues went to the field trip. And then after the field trip, we also work in the lab as anomalies and particularly. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 come, everything's changed. Your life is changed. So we cannot go everywhere easily. Always you have to wear your mask to protect yourself and also protect the people around you. We cannot handshake and we just say something to show them about your, your feeling. So the slogans in my country, so maybe in every country like the same thing. So we have said like love family, love nation, stop spreading COVID-19, stay at home, wash your hand, and social distancing at least 1 meter away from others. You can see this poster posted in everywhere and also in television, radio, and so on. So here I will summarize some COVID-19 situation in Laos. The population of Laos has only 7.5 million people. Over 14 people or cases were tested, but only 19 cases were infected from COVID-19. Now, we already know any infected at all and recover 19 people. No death. That is very, very lucky. So maybe this, maybe from many conditions. The first one, we thought that Laos is a hot, it is hot weather. So maybe the coronavirus cannot be like suitable for a spread in Laos. So after COVID-19 was found in Wuhan, China, the government of Laos has response plan for COVID-19 on January 2020. But in the first step, the COVID-19 situation is not serious. So the government can allow the people to go to work and all schools not closed. You can go to universities and also you can go to everywhere. You can make a meeting. You can make a party. So after January to February, the COVID-19 situations getting seriously in Laos. So that time the government have to set up and make it plans to fight with COVID-19 more tight. They not allow to people to go outside their house and also the communities. And the village also closed. For the checkpoint, the international checkpoint was closed. If some necessary, only 1 or 2 people to go outside, providing food and medicines. If you want to go somewhere, you have to get some permission letters or document from the heads of village or committee's head, and to tell them in the document what are you going to do and where are you going to go somewhere and what is your going to do at there. So this is quite very strict and very you know, like the plan is quite strict. So the people from the other country, they have to retain themselves by the government setting some place or some hall at least 40 days. And after 40 days, you can get back to the family. And in the family, you have also to separate from your family member at least also 14 days. Stop all kind of the transportation between province and district. So that means the government set up to COVID-19 control during the February. And then the Ministry of Education and Sport also developed the response plan to fight with COVID-19. And all school and educational institutions and universities has been closed in March 19. So that means in school and also universities closed and no any activities at all. Universities and schools closed and students have to get back to their home country. And however, the work should be continued. So the government to set up and to announce to people to work at home and to send everything from home. Laboratory in the universities are closed. No any experiments allowed. Students have to learn by online, and teachers also teach online. Administration's office or government office still open, but only 1 or 2 persons to come to running for running some urgent work. And if they have the meeting, you have meeting from home. No any field work and data collections. Fortunately, we are lucky because the COVID-19 ended from Laos, but we still in the condition to control. From 1st of May, the government decided to reopen school in Pangaribuan grade 5 and year of primary education, grade 9 secondary level, and others grade should be continue learn from home, not allowed to go to a school and university. And finally, all universities are reopening on June 15, 2020, but the country is still in lockdown mode. Life in university will go back to normal soon. Now, in universities and school, we already learning and teaching in class. For my plan, I will set in September for my field work and data corrections. This is my plan. Hope COVID-19 will leave the world soon and forever. And finally, I'm thank you to Balikpapan University for this nice program and invite me to join this wonderful seminar. And if any question, please welcome. Thank you. I will use very short time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the interesting presentation, Dr. Khamla. Salute to the people and the government of Laos for the zero death from COVID-19. Now we go to the last but not the least speaker, Dr. Lawrence Bakker. The room is yours, Dr. Lawrence.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Mary and Pa Adam and Pa Rector for inviting me and for organizing all this. I'll just wait a second before I can share my presentation, and then we can move on with that. Okay. So if all goes well, you can see it now, so that should be good. Well, first of all, I should perhaps point out that I am speaking to you from the Netherlands right now, but if things would have been different, or as they would normally be, I would quite likely have been in Indonesia, or very close to getting to Indonesia. So it's still very nice to meeting you, but it is definitely a different world. Well, as you have seen in the program, and as I have been announced, I work in the Department of Anthropology. I make a combination of anthropology and law. I did my Ph.D. in law, but I found that anthropology is more fun to work in. Excuses to the lawyers. But basically, most of my research is either in Indonesia or in Nigeria. So being in the Netherlands seems like a bit of a disadvantage. Luckily, of course, anthropologists study people. So it doesn't really matter that much where I am. I can work wherever I am. And the subject of COVID-19 and its effects is something I think is of rather importance to understand what the world is moving towards at the moment, and sharing some of our observations as what's going on in the Netherlands might pose a nice contrast to what my two colleagues have just told us about Thailand and Laos. Pretty much first because, of course, the impact here has been fairly severe. And second, also because the effects seem to be somewhat different. So basically, to first give you a bit of a background, in the Netherlands, the first case was found in late February. And that was in a tourist who returned from a holiday in Italy. And initially people thought like, well, yeah, it's not that terrible. We can just keep society going. So over March, the number of cases got larger. People started to get worried. Government was also pointing out like, well, take care of your hygiene. Don't get too close to people. If you're feeling ill, report to a doctor. One of the first effects that came from that was that in certain places, people started to buy supplies of food in supermarkets, notably supplies that would stay, like noodles or like rice, stuff like that. And curiously enough, that never happens here. But all of a sudden, in many supermarkets, yeah, these foodstuffs were gone, which of course worried other people, because they're like, but if everybody's doing it, then shouldn't I be doing the same thing? Another thing that had a large impact here that may not be very well known in Asia, I'm not sure, is that the Eurovision Song Festival got cancelled. And that may not mean very much in Asia, but in Europe it's a big thing. It's a singing competition between all the different countries. And it was to be held in Rotterdam this year. And of course, having that event cancelled meant that many people got really worried. Like, well, apparently this is a very big thing. Otherwise this would not be cancelled. So by the 23rd of March, the Netherlands entered in what its government called an intelligent lockdown. And by that it meant that there would be a lockdown, as of course was happening in many other countries by that time, but not as severe as it was in Italy, or as I just understood it was in Laos, for instance. Shops would stay open, for instance, but important shops, so shops like supermarkets, open air markets, all those could continue. All other shops, like clothing shops, shoe shops, which were not directly relevant, were asked to limit their opening hours, which happened. And people were asked to keep 1.5 meters distance, which is also usual throughout the world, basically. Other important venues of meeting, like theaters, restaurants, bars, and so on, all got closed, and quite a number of professions were also not allowed to operate, notably hairdressers, beauticians, all the ones that had close contacts with others. For us in university, March was still very much the time of teaching, if you like. And initially we got no instructions, except at one point our Minister of Education said, like, well, universities, everything will go online. It's not as if they had asked the universities first, like whether that was going to happen or not. They just told us, okay, from now on it's going to be online. Unfortunately, at the UvA, we have a technic department which had already this idea that it was going to happen. So they had set up this special contract with Zoom, which means that we have a rather good connection, and that it's not so difficult to have all the teaching moving from classrooms into an online setting. And of course, I think that many of you are in the university business, so I don't have to tell you the difference of standing in front of a classroom with 50 students and all of a sudden giving all your lectures to your computer, which is a very different situation and a very different way of working. And obviously also for students, from what I hear, for them it's also different from being in a university building and walking around and meeting their friends to just sitting behind their computer in their room all day. So basically in March, the country locked down. You could go out, you would not need to wear a face mask, you could go shopping and so on, provided you kept a distance and provided you respected the distance in others. Police were actually instructed that people could not meet in groups of more than 3. If so, you could get a fine. You could receive guests in your home, but only a very limited amount, and police would be allowed to come and enter to check whether you keep a distance. If you did not, you would also get fined. And the use of public transport would be limited to only people in essential professions, basically. And that was defined very broadly. That's medical personnel, for instance, but also university people. So as a lecturer, I could travel to my university by public transport, except that, of course, in my university, there were no students. So there would be very little reason for going there. So over time, this is pretty much how the lockdown was presented. It was also the time when spring started here, so weather was getting nicer after winter, so people wanted to go outside. So there were several issues of groups of people meeting up and how many people could meet up and so on. And pretty much every week we had a talk by the Minister President announcing what the state of the country was and how measures could be eased and made more easy to suit the people and the circumstances. And so slowly it developed, but kept fairly close, if you like, until the 15th of June, about 3 weeks ago, when the first measures were lifted, which meant that by now theaters are allowed to open again, but only for 30 people maximum. Some sort of teaching at universities is going on again. More people can use public transport. And by the 1st of July, measures were eased further. which basically means that you still need to respect this 1.5 meter distance, though there's very little check on that. But theaters can go to 100 people again, and you can have gatherings of 100 people in one space, provided you maintain that 1.5 meter distance again. But a lot of life is returning to some sort of normal. Restaurants are open again, cafes are open and normal. All shops are open again. And on the whole, yeah, the score seems to be somewhat on average, if you like. At the moment in the Netherlands, there are about 6,200 deaths, which are registered as resulting from COVID, and still 5,100 cases of people being infected and being ill with the virus. Compared to other countries, that's a relatively minor level, given that we have a population of 17 million in a very crowded place. But of course, compared to places in Africa and Asia and so on, 6,200, that is quite high. So I already just briefly mentioned what the circumstances are. I thought I should just put in a picture of our campus. We have 4 campuses basically, but this is the one where I work. Usually it has about 8,000 students and about 1,500 staff, I believe. But right now, if you go there, it's completely empty. We can use the building again, but no more than 20% of staff is allowed to be there at one time. And also, as Dr. Simab pointed out, if you go there, you need to, there's a whole protocol you need to follow as where you can go, how you maintain your hygiene, and so on, and what you can do there. So it's not encouraged basically to go to the campus unless you really need to be there. And for us, for teaching, it will also mean that as the year starts again in September, there will be very few physical lectures. It is expected that for the next year, at least the next half year, everything will pretty much continue online. There's also one reason for that. A lot of our lecture rooms have camera, so it will be easy to record, but even more lecture rooms don't have any cameras. So if you would have a live lecture, it would still be require new technology put in place to record it for people who cannot attend. And there is a plan now that for large classes, like say 200 people who would usually fit in one room, well, with 1.5 meters, you can fit in 50. So that means that there would be kind of a rotation scheme for the students. That's 1 in every 4 lectures, you can actually come and be there physically present, because students really point out that they are really missing this. Surprisingly, actually, this seems not to have an impact on the number of new students coming in. Actually, the numbers are going up again. And yeah, that is, of course, a bit of an interesting element, but also a bit strange, because you think like, well, if teaching is becoming so hard physically, then why do people go and join a new study this year? But it seems that many students or new students feel like, well, I can't do much else because there are no interim jobs available. There's the situation is still very much in some sort of lockdown. So if I want to go to university, then yes, better do it now. Now within the country, a lot of things are happening, and perhaps one of the major discussions here that I wanted to point out is the one on face masks. Face mask is a normal thing in Asia. It's quite common to meet people on the streets wearing a mask. In Europe, it's strictly considered, at least in the Netherlands, as something that is more or less impolite because you're hiding your face. You may be aware that, for instance, there is a ban in place on burqa in the Netherlands and in France and in other places. You're officially not allowed to enter public spaces with your face covered. It's not only burqa, it's also closed helmets and so on. It's not really kept up, but officially it's there. Well, here, all of a sudden, people got the order to cover their faces when going into public transport. And then the question, of course, came to the fore, what should a face cover be like? So you got a bit of a development in people starting to experiment like what it could be or what would count as a face cover and what does not. Because interestingly, for instance, medical face covers were illegal because medical face covers have a very high quality, so they should be preserved for medical personnel in hospitals, not used by ordinary people in public transport. So if you take a train now, you see very interesting kinds of face covers. Provided that they cover your nose and your mouth, they're pretty much allowed. But of course, whether they're that effective, I kind of doubt that. On the whole, you pretty much see two directions of how society is reacting towards the COVID situation. Notably from the beginning on, supports and observation of the rules was something that was very strong, and it still is, I have to say. In local circumstances, so in local neighborhoods, also in local, simply with neighbors, people are supporting each other a lot where that is necessary. So for vulnerable people like the elderly who live by themselves, people do their shopping, people help them get everything they need, make sure that they do not need to go outside. Similarly, for people with small children, when the schools closed, of course, all the children had to stay with the parents. But of course, the parents also needed to work. That's a bit of a difficult combination. So people set up these schemes, if you like, of looking after one another children, because children are considered as not spreading corona and not being as vulnerable to it as adults. And a lot of people are observing the rules for protection and distance that are required in the public space. At the same time, you see that there's a considerable amount of stress that comes from all of this, notably in young people. If I talk to my students, for instance, they have lost their jobs because they can't work, they can't go out of their rooms or their houses pretty much. They can't see their friends. And as I said, when spring was starting, it's usual for people to have parties outside in the park or on the street. And you see that in some places that still happens. And of course that's illegal, but then if you make sure that you run away before the police comes, then it's kind of possible. You also see there are people who think that who don't understand the necessity of keeping this distance, and so who also ignore the public distance from others who may be trying to keep the distance. So that is setting up tensions, if you like. There's also a small but vocal group, and it's getting more vocal over time, which is saying that, well, you know, corona, it's actually not real. It's just a ploy by government to clamp down and control society. And what government wants to do with that is just quickly instigate all sorts of other measures that that society would otherwise protest again, but now by making sure that society is docile because it's being kept under control by these measures, they can pretty much do whatever they like. So we should actually not believe that this is true. We should simply very strongly watch what government is doing and protest against it. And again, I'll come back to this in a bit. This is a very small group. It's perhaps a couple of hundred people in each city. But of course, they attract a lot of media attention. And that is why it's fairly visible, even though it's small. Now, on the personal level, I mentioned this, and I think this is quite important. The way in which people react is often, and I did not mention that here, but by helping out. As Dr. Simab also pointed out, that this is quite a possibility of helping with neighbors, with families, also in public life in general, where that is required. And many people report that that is indeed a way of coping with the situation and of feeling better with it. At the same time, many people report a higher level of stress due to lack of contacts with their friends, their families. Sports, of course, were not allowed for a long time, which also meant that you just sit in your house, and if your body is used to running, for instance, you can't go running. Yeah, that's not going to be very nice. And then, of course, people are afraid of infection. You can't see the virus, you can't see who has it and who doesn't. So going out, you have no idea really whether you're under risk or not, which adds another layer of stress. Well, I mentioned the ways in which people are annoyed by people who break the measures, who don't keep to them, and how they are annoyed with government, others again, for implementing all these measures. And of course, people work around that in legal ways as well. I mean, the picture which you see here, you see a couple of people waving to an elderly gentleman in the window over there. That's because, of course, yeah, the elderly are highly at risk. So they could not be visited. And often they don't have computers. They don't know how to use Zoom, for instance. So they can't be reached in electronic way. So what's happened is that in many places where elderly people live, people renting out these cranes would provide a crane for free. And then they would have family of those people coming and just lift them up to the window of the people, keeping a distance of 2 or 3 meters, but make sure that they could meet their friends or their family, even if it's from the outside of the building in this way. And this has become a bit of a cult thing. It includes lifting up orchestras and all sorts of artists to play for these elderly people. So this is a highly visible way of dealing with the effects of COVID, trying to lessen them, if you like. But of course, as I mentioned, there's also a lot of stress on another level, a less personal level. It has a higher impact on the economy, and that's not different in other countries, obviously. But imagine, for instance, the hairdressers, which is not a job that makes a lot of money to begin with. But if you then need to close your business for about 3 months, a lot of them run the risk of simply going broke, being a bankrupt, as it's called. And that also goes for people working in the restaurant or the cafe business, many other lines of work. So for a lot of people, their jobs and their livelihoods are seriously impacted and are actually at stake. And for those people as well, this notion that COVID may be not as severe, not as dangerous as governments and scientists purport it to be, is a good reason for complaining about this. I mean, if you think back, COVID here is often compared to the Black Death, the plague in the Middle Ages. Well, in those days, apparently about 1/3 of the population died, and you would have dead people lying in the streets and everything that goes with it. Fortunately, that is not the case here, but people also argue that, but you don't see anyone with COVID, and you don't hear about people with COVID. And of course, I would argue that this is proof of the effective ways in which the hospitals and the medics and government and society are dealing with it. But you could also, of course, what they do, consider that as proof of it not actually being there. And that ties in with the issue of demonstrations at large. Before COVID started, there were some issues going on, notably farmers demonstrating because the agrarian sector, the agricultural sector is up for a regreening, if you like. And of course that's, they were not too pleased with that because they're likely the ones that need to pay. And all of a sudden, all of their demonstrations were being forbidden, basically because they would be a risk to health of society. But then a couple of weeks ago, as you probably have heard about, the Black Lives Matter demonstrations started first in the United States, but they moved on to Europe, so also in the Netherlands. And all of a sudden there were these groups of thousands of people demonstrating, and that was being condoned. It was being allowed. At first it was allowed because these people quite often really took care to keep distance from one another. But other factions, again, like the farmers, like people who want to demonstrate against vaccines, against 5G connectivity and so on, thought like, well, then we can demonstrate again as well. But those demonstrations are often still considered illegal. The reason for that is that quite often demonstrations by organizations who want to demonstrate against corona measures tend to attract support from football hooligans or other people who are out there to cause a riot rather than to have a peaceful demonstration. Also, again, they usually are a mixture. It's angry farmers, it's people against corona measures, it's people whose livelihood is at stake, it's people demonstrating against vaccines, it's people demonstrating against 5G connectivity. Also because there's this small story going around that corona is in fact spread by 5G connectivity and not by a virus. Again, I'm talking about dozens of people perhaps, but of course it attracts media attention. So this whole mix of people who want to demonstrate tend to organize and try and come together, but generally their demonstrations are then forbidden or confronted by police. So that is something that builds tensions. The way like why are Black Lives Matter demonstrations allowed? And why can't we demonstrate? On the whole, pretty much what we see happening in the Netherlands is also this move to what in Dutch is called nieuwe normaal, but I'm sure you can guess that that means new normal. Strictly speaking, we see that people are coping quite well and are really in support of government policies. The number of deaths is, tragically over 6,000, but nevertheless, if compared to the number of the population as such, that is a reasonably good score, if you like. Many people see this actually, the entire situation of the lockdown now, as a driver for change, as a situation of how things can be to improve life in general. For instance, Amsterdam is really clamping down on, what's it called? On Airbnb and on other sorts of illegal tourist rentals, basically because people living there have been complaining a long time that the city has become a fun park rather than a city to live in. And yeah, government tends to agree, and they say like, well, this is an excellent moment to change that. We're going to clamp down on the number of tourist businesses and we're going to make this a livable city again. And people are pointing out like, well, it would be quite possible to have less plane flights, for instance, or to indeed re-green parts of the city and perhaps work more from home rather than everybody traveling to offices in the daytime. So it is bringing up ideas, which might actually be a good outcome, if you like, caused by this crisis. But then again, many people are really troubled physically by what they consider a lack of perspective. The idea that perhaps over the whole of next year, there won't be a new vaccine, which is quite likely, I agree, that they may need to continue working from home, that they may still need to take care in meeting their friends and families and so on. And that is something that seems to really be a heavy burden for many people to deal with. And that is something that apparently government is now discussing with psychologists as well, like how do you help people if this is such a mass development. Well, the economy is obviously being hit pretty hard. As you may know, the Netherlands has a large services and transport sector, and of course all of those are not at their optimum at the moment. And then of course the personal level, people with contact jobs or who need to meet a lot of people, have also been hit quite severely. I mentioned the lack of visibility of COVID. If you don't know of people who died of it, if you don't see any people who are suffering from it, yes, that does raise the issue with people that actually there may not be so much COVID, or perhaps that it's not even so dangerous as governments and scientists purport it is. And finally, as I pointed out just now, the last point, protestings are becoming more visible. And even though it's marginal, it is something that is developing. And this has been just the past few weeks. So that's the most recent form of COVID impact, if you like, that is taking place. So if I were to draw a timeline over the past few months, it would start with people being very worried, very scared, very closely following up with government instructions, slowly getting looser and less vigilant in that. Government following that line as the number of cases did not rise really, and lessening measures. And as a consequence, again, people demanding further letting go of measures and more freedom, also to this, in particular, to display their discontent with government policy on the whole. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that the Netherlands is on the brink of some sort of revolution. That's certainly not the case. Again, demonstrations are small groups only, as it is. And those that do just attract a lot of media attention because, again, there's not that much for the media to report on because the country otherwise is still very much keeping its measures and keeping its control. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to tell you. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. I'm extremely proud of the all wonderful presentations. Now we move on to the discussion or question and answer session. We have around 30 minutes at this session. To participants who are having questions, you may write the questions in the chat window or click raise hand tab in the participants window, then convey your questions directly to the intended speaker. All right, we have some questions come. First, from Pak Agus Setiawan. He would like to know how to get maximum result on education and research while technologies such as technology industry 4.0 still left behind. So which one of you may comment this question? Maybe Dr. Lawrence? Do you have something to say?
Yeah, well, if I knew the answer to this, my university would be very happy, I guess. But no, I mean, it's one thing that we are considering ourselves. I mean, we are doing most of our teachings through Zoom right now. But imagine if you're a student and you are obliged to sit behind a screen and look at your lecturers for 6 hours a day in this way. That's not really nice. So right now we are doing it in the ways that we make PowerPoints with vocals in it. So basically that people can listen to that beforehand and that we have a discussion session rather than an online lecture. And we sometimes have online lectures in which students can then react and interact. Sometimes we put it in discussions group with only small groups of students, so 3 or 4, so that you can really have interaction going on. But of course that takes a lot more time from the lecturers. And that is a bit of an issue with this. Again, there's also a bit of a fear in universities that actually this might be, given that this electronic lecturing is working, this might be a reason for central government to say like, well, then we can actually cut down on funding because they don't need all these lectures in classes and these actual physical meetings. They can do it this way. And there has been some thought on that in central government, which already attracted a lot of protests, luckily. Because one thing that we are finding is that both students and staff really find that the physical meeting, if you like, being in one room is rather important. But that's actually talking around your question rather than answering it. But perhaps one of my colleagues has there's a better idea on it.
Okay. How about Dr. Simab? Do you have something to say? Please unmute your speaker, please.
Sorry. Okay, can you just rephrase the question? The point was not very clear to me.
Actually, this is about technology that's still left behind. Then how come we can get maximum results on education and results then?
Okay. At first, I must share with you that all of the countries, all of the communities are not, going equally in terms of the technological advancements. I also shared in my presentation that there are even people who don't know how to use the latest apps and how to, make maximum use. The digital illiteracy is existing there, but apart from there are some countries that are facing different kind of the previous troubles, like the political conflicts, some kind of the social and economic deficiencies are there. So it's not really easy to cope with this new generation of learning and conducting the research activities. And it's not going to be acceptable for everyone equally around the globe. For example, if I just talk about some kind of the Middle East countries where some kind of the political instabilities are going on there. So how could you expect them that they will go parallelly with the well-developed or advanced countries in terms of the use of the technologies or competing them in research work? So we have to think in case of the parameters, of course. And I also said that the young researchers and the students are the one who are more vulnerable to this situation, of course. So in that, what you have to do is you have to work with what you have already in your hands. You know, there were times, of course, when the internet was not, you know, very common. The online classes that are just introduced right now. Before the pandemic, even there were the online lectures and courses from some very good universities around the world that were going on online, and they were quite accessible to everyone around the world. But that was just a kind of the option. But now, you know, it's a sort of, it became compulsory. It's no more an option. You have to carry on your pace with these current instructions and these kind of the rules that are implemented by the institution. So if you just have some kind of the data with you, just go and you know, work with the books and what you have in the paper form with you, and you can also observe or talk to people. It depends on the type of the research work that you are making. But this situation is very different, that of course you cannot go publicly to conduct interview, to meet people, even to go to libraries. So you have to look at the alternatives, what you really have in your hands, to make the maximum out of that. Like if you have the previous data, just try to analyze using that and try to learn. If you don't be scared of using or discovering new technical programs, new technologies, new apps, and so on, take it as a challenge. It is a challenge for everyone. So we, as a fellow, as a research community, definitely we should go ahead to help those communities as well, and trying to give, you know, or extend our communication and our suggestions to them as well. And there is a dire need for that, of course.
Okay, so we go to Tanti. Hello, Dr. Simab, you finished already?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So we go to the questions from Tanti Sri Kuswiyanti. Maybe all speakers are able to respond these questions. Her question is, due to COVID-19, the government in Indonesia only focused to support the research dealing with the pandemic. How about the other field of research? Should we just focus on the research focusing on COVID-19? Maybe Dr. Khamla, you may respond this question. Dr. Khamla?
Yes, thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
That's a good questions. I also read the question from that question. So that's good. For example, in the government of every country, not only support in the research in other field, but the should be focused in COVID-19, because this is the very, very new knowledge for all of the researchers. So you have to make it clear to the people or government what is the COVID-19 pandemics or dangerous to the people, to the people in the country. So the government should be pay some more fund to make a research on the COVID-19, to make clear and to know COVID-19 more clearly, and to educate the people in the country. So I don't know what is the next futures, what is the government of the country to focusing on this research. But I think it's very important, government should be support and to make research more deeply and more clearly on about this. This is just my idea.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khamla. Again to Dr. Simab. Maybe.
Dr. Simab.
Many participants is interested to your topic. From Rugaya.
In
He
fact,
asked, yes.
you want to me to
Yeah,
answer?
yeah. There's question from Rugaya. She asks about research topic related to how kill the virus and make them stop production. Since in this pandemic, it is suggested to do research in holistic backgrounds such as virology, medical, biology, physics, instrumentation, etc. So this carrier, she is willing to know how to do the research or what kind of research topic to this to get this maybe vaccine or medicine to kill the virus. The question is so long.
Okay, I get that. I will combine the two questions and try to answer like the previous one and the one that you just asked, both of them. In fact, definitely there is a dire need of conducting the research work and to get the new knowledge in terms to help out the human communities out of this pandemic, and such kind of the research work and knowledge is required that can fill in the gaps that were previously existing. A very important thing that I would like to share with the researchers, and they might know about that, all viruses, they do not behave similarly. What was effective in case of the SARS or MERS or HIV it may not be effective in case of the coronavirus, COVID-19. So we just have to try. And a different, I cannot specify some titles specifically, but I can just share some ideas about the research work that it basically, also I'm not a virologist, okay, I'm a biochemist by specialty and a molecular biologist. So it doesn't really matter, you know, interdisciplinary sciences are really very, very interesting always to me. Like you can combine the ideas from virology with biochemistry, or from the physics with computational biology, and as we also have Dr. Lawrence here as an anthropologist. So it's just like combination of the data and research work from the real-time data that is coming from the society, from different communities, and combine them with the cases, the medical cases, and also toward the identification of the drugs. If you are belonging to some pharmaceutical field, you can think about different modes of implications of the drugs and the natural compounds that may act as an antiviral agent. So it's quite so vast, and I really understand that now the funding agencies have also turned their direction toward funding, toward just supporting more and more projects for funds that are just addressing the current pandemic situation. So it should not be a big deal. I think you can just go for the interdisciplinary sciences. If you don't have a good laboratory, like, you know, when we work specifically with viruses, we need to have the biology safety laboratory level 3 or 4 at least, and every country does not all it. So you can go for the computational chemistry or computational biology. That is what most of the countries who don't have the biology safety laboratories level 3 and 4, they are doing it right now, and they are just having very good publications. Even I have gone through the publications on the basis of the computational data in recent times, last month, and even the previous time since the pandemic has begun. So you always don't need to work with the viruses just to make research on COVID-19. There are different perspectives that you can study. And you also have to study a bit and build a bit of the basic knowledge first, that what kind of the drugs are so far in market or commercially available, what are their mode of action, and you can just do some kind of the computational studies, some bioinformatics, but definitely you need to have the basic skills for that. And I must tell you that the computers, they just give us the knowledge. They don't give us the intelligence. So don't ever think that if you're lagging behind in research equipments, in laboratory facilities, as compared to the laboratories in the highly developed countries, an idea can never die. So you can modify it according to the facilities that you have present in your institute or in your laboratory right now. So any one of you can communicate with me directly. You can get my email address from the moderators if they want to discuss any kind of the idea or any kind of the guidance. I'm not a virologist by specialty, but definitely I will just try my talk about that to discuss. And just, you know, it is all about sharing the knowledge between the scientific community.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Rugaya. We hope that this can answer your questions well. Then we go to the next question from our rector, Dr. Piatur Pangaribuan. The question goes to Dr. Khamla. Rector asking, can you explain people in your country only 19 get COVID and none that? Is it because of full lockdown from outside country or any strategy taken by the Laos government? Please.
Thank you. Very good question from the director. So this question is a very good question. And in my slide, I also mentioned about the why Laos has only 19 infected from COVID-19 and non-dead. This is both. The first thing is after the COVID-19 was announced from China, and then on January, Lao government was setting the plan for the fighting with the COVID-19 in earlier. So in that time, the government tried to lock down, not allow for the visa for the foreigner, and any of the flight, the government tried to stop it early. And after that, the situation of COVID-19 in Laos was seriously from at the end of January to February. So that time the government tried to set up and try to make the plan more strict and make it, very, I don't know how to say, a communicate thing. So make it the people cannot not allow the people to go outside and decide to close the school, decide to close the restaurant, decide to close the barber shop and everything in February. And the people from the other country, even though inside the country, when you go to different province or district, you have to retain yourself 14 days. And in the village or in the communities, they have the safeguard or COVID-19 checkpoint. So when you go to somewhere, you have to pass the COVID checkpoint to check your body temperatures, washing your hands, and if your body temperature is over 37.5, you have to go to see the doctors. And this is the first is the lockdown country in earlier, and second one is the responding plan to fight with the COVID-19 of the government is get the successful. Thank you. This is get for your question, Director.
Thank you, Dr. Khamla. So now we go to the last question from Pak Supri Rosadi. Maybe Pak Supri Rosadi will give the live questions, please. Live question from Pak Supri Rosadi. The room is yours, Pak Rosadi. Gimana? Okay, it seems Pak Rosadi has problem with his connection, so we go to the next from Bu Dewi Sartika. But the questions chat to Pak Adam, so I ask Pak Adam to read the questions first.
Okay, so I think this question goes to Pak Lawrence. Dewi Sartik asking about in this pandemic situation, face mask, the used face mask that people get rid of it once they have already used it, polluted the oceans. What do you think? What we can do to reduce the pollution in waters? It's about life of the animals that are living in the ocean. Thanks, Pak Lawrence.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for that question. I think there are two things, and actually this is very much a debate that's going on here as well. I mean, many people in the Netherlands, notably young people, are very much conscious of the environment, and they do not wish to use face masks that need to be thrown away. Of course, medically speaking, a face mask is a one-use object, as I understand it, because first time you use it, after that it's polluted, you can't use it again. But given that people quite often here use the face mask to protect them, not so much in a medical situation, they're not face to face with people who are already suffering from COVID, they are just using it to protect themselves from getting infected. So the risk is a lot smaller. What we see here a lot is that people use face masks, which they then reuse. And those are not the paper ones or the ones that are really meant for use one time, but ones made out of cloth, for instance, or out of plastic. But of course, the danger, well, the good thing about that is that it lessens the waste that it creates. The danger, of course, is that people don't clean them. If you have a face mask that you want to reuse, you need to clean it in between. And that is, of course, something that some people are aware of, but something that notably medical personnel in the Netherlands is now strongly pointed out in the media, saying that yes, it's a very good idea to use reusable masks, but do clean them in between, because otherwise they're still not that useful. They may still protect you from getting COVID, but other bacteria may get in because it's a dirty mask and you will get ill with something else. So reusable masks seem to be a good idea to lessen the waste, but yeah, it requires another type of care again.
Okay, seems all questions have been responded. Now we are going to end this webinar. We hope that the experience in this webinar will be engraved in your memory and we may take away key insights and information into how to conduct researches and community services under COVID-19 pandemic. As Dr. Simab said that right now, maybe this is still traumatic for you, but it's important to remember that you are not the only one in this situation and that normal research activities will eventually resume. It's going to be okay, like our fellow researchers in Laos, Bangkok, and Amsterdam. On behalf of Institute for Research and Community Services, Balikpapan University, I express our sincere appreciation to all speakers for the nice talks and all participants for joining this webinar. We wish you all success, health, happiness, and prosperity. Again, thank you. I turn the room over to Pak Adam.
Thank you, Bu Mary. Dear all participants, this is the end of our webinar. To Dr. Simab, Dr. Lawrence, and Dr. Khamla, please do stay in the meeting room after this. To all participants, you should be able to see the link for you to fill in the attendance list, and then you can get your certificate directly onto your email. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay productive. Terima kasih. Selamat sore. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.